I have a question to the audience. How many of you are CFOs of a large company? How many of you are project managers, project officers, portfolio managers or so? Raise your hand. Okay, good. I was right with my assumption, because when Daniel asked us what he should talk about, I said, you know, most of the, or actually nobody in the audience can imagine what innovation means from a CFO perspective or from a company perspective, and what role project managers play in that perspective. And so this is what Daniel is going to talk about. Daniel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning also from my end. Might that be the alto? So a noisy start. Is it getting better? Let me start anyhow. So CFO and innovation, isn't that a bit a contradiction, or at least intuitively? Aren't the typical CFOs the personalities which bean count, which stand on the brakes whenever it comes around spending discussions, etc.? I think that used to be true in the past to a certain degree. In my view, modern CFOs or companies with modern CFOs, they simply cannot allow to let this be a contradiction. I'm first of all very glad to see you in flesh, to see you in person. Normality is getting back. Last night I just was arriving from Paris on a flight back to Zurich, reading myself into the spirit, into the material of today's event, and usually I want to give it a special color, and last night on that flight I asked myself, what do companies need to do to be and to remain successful? And I think, Klaus Christoph knows that, I think I invented something. I'm quite creative. It's dangerous to be creative as a CFO, but in these terms, I think I invented a magic dice. And DICE stands for delivery first, then improvement, then seize, and explore. So these are the four words, I would say, which match perfectly into every organization to bring organizations forward. It also matches perfectly in an innovation thought tank, if I may say so. So that is accompanying me throughout the whole presentation. It matches perfectly into my part of the presentation. I'm a CFO by passion, but I'm also a very passionate investor into ventures. So I like new ideas. I like thinking out of the box, and I like people who like to think out of the box. Here as well, must not be a contradiction at all for a CFO. It is complementary, I would say. And talking about projects, and then I will get to the gist of the presentation. Talking about projects, I used to be an airport developer for 15, 16, 17 years in my professional career. I developed airports in Bangalore and in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte and in Curaçao. That was the most favorite one. And also the Circle at the airport before it was then being ramped up. So I spent quite a lot of my time with projects, with big brick and mortar projects, before I then moved over into the digital world. They're related somehow, the two worlds. Of course, here it's concrete, and here it's IT in particular. But from an intellectual perspective, the thinking is exactly the same. So let me share a couple of thoughts. Either the battery is gone. Oh no, there we go. When we look at SIX, digitalization and innovation has been part of our history for 91 years, almost, because Zurich Stock Exchange opened in the year 1930. Then what you would never think, because it doesn't exist today anymore, is that Swiss Stock Exchange was the first exchange. Thanks a lot. Talking about exchange, exactly. was the first exchange to have its own TV broadcast already in the year 1962, so in black and white. Then the foundation of the Swiss Stock Exchange, which was actually nothing else than a merger between Geneva, Basel, and Zurich, but it was the first centric merger of a couple of stock exchanges around the European realm. Then, 1995 as well, another important landmark for our exchange. We were Europe's first exchange to allow electronic trading only. And we just recently have been awarded by our Swiss regulator, FINMA, with a license to run trading and post-trading on a 6 digital exchange. So the first worldwide end-to-end, fully regulated exchange being able to issue and also to trade tokenized asset classes. Now I've talked about the first electronic exchange. That has not always been the case. So some of you, the gray hairs in the audience, might probably remember how the times have been a little bit earlier. And let me just share a couple of moments from these times. So that's always, every time, amazing. Can you imagine nowadays? And the life expectation at this time of these traders was at somewhere in the mid-50s, and it doesn't surprise looking at those gestics and those emotions attached to those former traders. So we have shifted quite a lot. There is no ring trading anymore. Everything is digitized, everything is being tokenized going forward. So innovation has always been at the very forefront and at the very center for our organization. By doing so, we were able, as SIX, to grow, but everything attached to constant innovation. You've talked about spending money. We spend like 1 million Swiss francs per day, and for the last 10 years, and we will do so in tendence, rather a little bit more than that, 1 million Swiss francs per day in innovation and in enhancement of what we are doing. So that makes roughly 200 million Swiss francs a year committed to innovation and committed to enhancement. It would be the easiest thing for a CFO to just cut that short by 50 million Swiss francs or maybe even 100 million Swiss francs. Nothing would happen in the first 1 or 2 years. But after 5 years, we would see the Kodak effect, and I would bet quite a lot on that. So therefore, we are committed. That made it possible to grow together with the overall ecosystem of our financial center here in Switzerland. Transactions have gone through the roof until 2019 and then exploded. I will come back to that during 2020 COVID. And by doing so, by innovating, by earn the money to invest into the organization, we got more effective, we got more productive, and that then allowed to our customer that the unit costs gradually came down and down and down, and that story will also continue going forward. Now today we are the backbone of the whole Swiss financial center, but in the meantime also the Spanish financial center with its 4 stock exchanges, playing a reliable, playing a predictable role as a central infrastructure provider. As long as you don't hear about SIX, everything is fine. As long as you hear something around about SIX, it might get critical, as we are in the B2B business only and not in the B2C activities. Just a couple of metrics which you don't find here on that slide. I mean, the daily volume which is traded on our exchange platform here in Switzerland sums up to approximately 6-7 billion Swiss francs just in one single day. And it even gets more impressive. The 6 interbank clearing part, which we do operate on behalf of the Swiss National Bank, so this is something unique for our exchange here as well. There is a financial volume of approximately 300 billion Swiss francs on just one single day. And on peak days, it even goes up to like 600 to 650 billion Swiss francs pressed through our infrastructures. And that just means stability, innovation, and also predictability. By the way, 650 million Swiss francs, that's the GDP of Switzerland in one full year, which is being pressed through these interbank clearing platform on just one single day. And we have been able to prove that we are able to stem massive volumes. Just mentioned 6-7 billion Swiss francs traded on one single day. During the crisis, COVID crisis, it went up to like 20 to 25 billion Swiss francs being traded. So very, very high volatilities, and the capacities were able to stem all that quite seamlessly without any noise around it. So what we do basically is we create a bouquet of several offerings around financial information. That's also that has been something very unique from a value chain perspective. We are not just trading and do all the post-trade activities, but also deliver data, so reference data, corporate action data, index data, etc., because that goes hand in hand and is ultimately a logic that it belongs together into the whole portfolio, and then rounded up by banking services, which I would say is the field where we are at the moment, together with the digital exchange, probably most innovative around the whole organization. And that then pays into the whole ecosystem of the Swiss Financial Center. So we push innovation. We try to support, we try to help the banks and partially also the insurance companies in our countries to try to monetize their ideas on one central infrastructure platform in order to let them grow, in order to create value. And here it comes again back to the very outset of the presentation. Innovation brings growth, growth brings top-line contribution usually brings profit contribution as well. So there is an inherent logic in innovation and also finance. And that then again pays into the whole Swiss economy, what we do, supporting the monetary policy of the National Bank, as also supporting the whole financial center here in Switzerland. Now, to remain competitive, we have defined 3 major pillars how to grow. And how to grow by innovation is, of course, one important element to pay in. Another one is the organic growth by doing more of the same what we are already doing nowadays, maybe also do it better. And that then comes back exactly to this magic, I call it magic Schmucki dice, because it is deliver and then also improve and then also explore and seize. For me, seize is almost the most important element of those 4 letters, because to never ever throw good money after bad money. It's perfectly fine to explore, but it needs courage and braveness to stop things, to seize things and start from scratch or try something new. And how many times have we seen evolutions in companies where one doesn't have the courage to say no, one throws good money after bad money, and then it usually ends in a disaster. So that's the organic growth, and then of course also inorganic growth. Just acquired 4 Spanish exchanges. We did transactions acquired in companies in the US. And by the way, that is also something very striking and also astonishing. We acquired companies in UK and in Canada, fully on a virtual basis. So we have not one single time met our counterparts. Negotiations have happened only virtually, including now the integration. So it is possible. Would you have asked me 3-4 years ago, I would have rigidly said never ever possible. It is possible, but there is a caveat. The soul of such transactions, they get lost. And once you lose soul and spirit of such transactions, you usually also lose a little bit of value in such transactions. So I'm very glad that hopefully normality is returning. The targets, which is another element which goes hand in hand and is a stretch on a daily basis for, I would say, for every project manager in your guys' community, but also for every organization in general. On one hand, you have the shareholders, the breath of the shareholders in our necks, and sometimes it's pretty cold, this breath. So they have clear asks. On the other hand, you need to be competitive with pricing. So whatever is being developed must be affordable for customers. And then the third element of this trilemma is never ever stand into the trap of saving costs on behalf of innovation or of reinvestments. Short term, absolutely fine. Long term, for sure, a big disaster. And therefore, innovation as well as reinvestments in business, these are the siblings of our growth strategy as well as from our economic trilemma we are exposed. But let's not just talk concept-wise, let's also be a little bit more crisp and concrete. It was mentioned hackathons is scarce in certain organizations. F10 was the first incubator for the Swiss Financial Center for InsurTech and also FinTech, extremely successfully with dozens of, in the meantime, hundreds of hack days, which have been done with very innovative and also out of the box thinking people, feeding ideas into our organization, into SIX, feeding ideas into the whole financial center. And that also includes, by the way, a venture fund from our organization where we have scouted in the last 2.5 years 1,500 companies globally. And all startups in the seed phase or maybe in the Series A phase. So enormously exciting companies, and even more exciting are the people behind it. And then we decide as SIX whether to invest money into it. And there is no CFO asking you what's the IRR of that investment down to the third digit after the comma. That goes hand in hand with courage and bravery in buying in innovation, because not invented here is probably the worst statement of every company. Look what happens outside. And then buy in those good ideas, buy in those good people, but don't infect them with your corporate kind of behavior and the Thai culture within the organization. Don't infect them with processes, too many processes and too much governance and too much compliance, because that would immediately turn down the creativity of such company. White papers is also one of the critical thought leader elements which we have established in our organization. I quickly come back to that. And then also the PM community within SIX, which is a booster of knowledge exchange in particular, and knowledge exchange is the basis for to become better. So I already mentioned F10. I will not go much deeper into it. It is basically a network for corporates, startups, investors, mentors, a community to build up, to create this network, actually located in Barcelona, in Madrid, in Singapore, as well as in Zurich. And as you can imagine, this is the best basis and the best machinery to acquire talents in F10. So the opportunities are almost borderless. White papers, we are fostering our internal, but also with the academia, the overall knowledge on where the journey from an intellectual perspective, mixed then with the corporate experience, will go to and define then white papers which are being discussed within communities, but also within corporates. We do that not just by ourselves, but also in partnership with universities here in Switzerland, but also internationally in the meantime. And then the results are the future of money, for instance. Where does cash go to? What is the future of brick and mortar commerce, so over the counter versus hybrid models versus pure online shopping, and what is the role of the Swiss Financial Center there? There's lots of money to be earned in these areas. So this is at the fundament, I would say, the intellectual fundament and oxygen of what we do in innovation. And then the project management community, which is something which we have set up from scratch within the organization in general. We found out that, even if I look into that room, there's so much intellectual potential within this room, but also within our organization when it comes around project, but also project management. I was always looking for efficiency around these topics. We tried to do it on a central basis only within SIX, but then found out after a year or 1.5 years that this might be one of the catalysts to get better, but definitely isn't sufficient. So we have then installed a so-called PM community at SIX. There are 220 people gathering and exchanging experiences. External speakers are being invited. It is basically a platform to become better, to become leaner in project management, and to become, by that, more efficient overall. So that brings me, I hope I'm fine with the time. Usually I overrun, but that brings me to conclusion, or maybe that's more or less a repetition of what I already said. And let me try to put now these magic dice again into perspective. So delivery, that goes hand in hand, that cannot be contested. That definitely goes hand in hand. Improve what you deliver, you have to improve. You constantly need to improve. Seize, again, to me, by far the most important topic. Organizations, projects are getting distracted. If no one has the courage to seize activities, to say stop it now, and let's go 3-4 steps back. And then, of course, evolution, and evolution goes hand in hand with innovation. So this kind of curiosity, constant curiosity to evolve, to be innovative for a company. So with this magic dice statement, I do hope I gave you some color into what our spirit, what our soul around project management, around innovation, and around the financial leadership within SIX is. And with that, I would like to close my part and wish you a very nice remainder of the day and a successful PMI day. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you very much. Do you have 5 minutes for questions, or you need to run to the next meeting?
No.
Okay, good. We are absolutely perfect in time. We even have 5 minutes for questions. So who has a question? Okay, Florian.
Daniel, I really like your push on innovation here. Now, I think you said it really well. You need stability with the financial systems and the money that goes through. Now, I would be really interested to understand, how do you manage the innovation on one side and minimum viable products that constantly break, and to feed them into your system that needs a lot of stability? How do you do that transition?
There is a kind of an analogy. So you know what I want to say. With the aviation industry, there was always safety first. So don't do things like an open heart surgery while in parallel being in a brain surgery. So be extremely careful not to harm, not to hamper stability within an organization. And the very same also goes hand in hand with what we do here at Exchange. You heard the numbers, the impressive numbers, and flaws are simply not allowed. So, and that brings us to, I would say, to one of the biggest problems in this infrastructure-related organization. That's the legacy platform. There is no way ever that you can change a legacy platform from one day to another and everything is solved. So it must go along gradually, or then you build something up in parallel. Let me also take the example of, let me take the example of an airport. If you build a new terminal, you build it in parallel, and then you open the new one once it's completed and the regulator said yes, and everything is fine, and then you shut down and demolish the old one. It's exactly, and it has to be exactly the same in our industry here in the financial services as well. So that the legacy topic is probably the biggest, I would say, threat as well as chance. So you have to look holistic into kind of innovations, but on the other hand, you have to be careful to, how to eat an elephant, bite by bite, probably. And there's another famous statement: don't try to boil the ocean at once. So, but start small. You might think big, start small, and then grow fast. So now enough quotes from which I read somewhere else. Minimum viable projects and how to get along with setbacks with that topic. Here comes the CFO again, and that's then really the hardline CFO. I'm actually only interested in innovative ideas can be translated into P&L. So it either is leading us to higher revenues, or it is going to reduce our costs or make us more efficient. And then what I mean with hardline CFO, I want to see it on the relevant line per line item. Where exactly are we now going to save cost, and also when? And that is a little bit the headache to the PMI, to the PM community, potentially in our organization. So we have lots of room for innovation, but when it comes to the stage where we talk about minimum viable project and past this gate and it goes on, I want to see it very concrete, and also in German we say verbindlich, and then it needs to be delivered, and it is also going to be tracked. So that's then the balance which we need to find. I hope that at least conceptually I was able to answer your question.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, I'm sure we would have lots and lots of additional questions. Unfortunately, Daniel's calendar, you can imagine, is very full, so he can't stay with us. Maybe you can join us for a lunch break or a coffee break or in the evening.
I cannot promise it. I will certainly try to do so.
But if you'd like to hear more about SIX, I think we are about 40 people from SIX here, so talk to us. You can identify us by the company name on our name tag. And I'm sure we can also tell you some stories and some background information about SIX.
About me as well.
Yeah. So
thank you very much and have a nice day. Cheers.
Daniel.